Welcome, everyone. If you don't know where you are, you're at Evoking Curiosity for curated, collaborative, and consumer-created content. Ooh, we got some alliteration strength there. We are with Veronica Howard today from the University of Alaska Anchorage and Rachel Porter from Mary Baldwin University, and I will turn the time over to them.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. So hopefully you're in the right place with our alliterative presentation here. Veronica and I are both here representing not only our institutions and ourselves, but also our OER special interest group through the Association for Behavior Analysis International. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about that. Veronica, if you could switch us to the next slide. So our mission is to make sure that we are trying to provide information about low cost or free, open educational resources that are available for our specific discipline. We'll be talking a little bit more about our discipline in a little bit, but Veronica and I are both behavior analysts. So behavior nerds, behavior weirdos, whatever works for you. But we love data, we love behavior, and we love analyzing it and talking about it. But what's unique about our SIG, our special interest group, is that there's no cost to be a member. It is specific to our discipline of ABA, but we'd encourage you to check out our website. We have a QR code as well if you want to take a look there. Veronica, you want to drive us over? There we go. So we made some promises when we agreed to make this presentation for you all. And so here's what we want to make sure that we are doing for you today. We're going to talk about some examples of OER curation and student-generated created content that we are engaging with our students. We also are going to talk about the role of cultural context and how this intersects with anti-bias education and pedagogical practices, and give you an opportunity to consider how you might also replicate some of these in a manner that is ethical, but aligns with your specific disciplinary area as well. So most of you here, you're at the Open Ed. Hopefully you've got a good sense, certainly by the end of day 2, if you didn't already, what are OER. So these are those tools, those resources that are under an open license that will allow us to retain, reuse, remix, revise, and redistribute for the benefit of teaching and learning. So we hope to be able to share some more of that with you here in a few. Veronica.
Thank you. And as Dr. Potter was mentioning, we assume that folks are going to have some baseline knowledge of open educational resources coming in. Open educational resources, of course, can make the educational playing field more equitable. They can promote student performance. They can help students who are traditionally marginalized in higher education. And we see that there's not only increasing awareness of open educational resources, what they are, the value of them, but that the adoption of open educational resources, especially in lower division courses, rivals that of many commercial titles or even commercial publishing houses. So they become quite popular in lower division courses. And that is what we want to talk about today. What happens when, to pick up on the chat conversation, what happens when you are in a niche specialty area? What happens if you have, like Dr. Potter and I have, a specialty in behavior analysis, or Dr. Clinton, a specialty in cognitive psychology? Are there resources available for you? The difficulty is that when you look at the available resources, we're really lagging behind what we need to be able to support students in higher division and specialized courses, especially those that might lead to professional certification. In our field, for instance, we recently published this work about what's available in the field of behavior analysis that could supplement an introductory course. And spoiler alert, there is a QR code if you want to read it, but there are insufficient materials to make even an introductory level course in behavior analysis. So what do you do when those resources don't exist? As we've seen in some other presentations at the conference this year, there are ways to go slow, to build your resources, to build your repositories, but we think that open pedagogy, or actually involving students in the process of creation, can be one way of helping to address the fact that there aren't many resources available in behavior analysis. Open-enabled pedagogy is likely also a term that many of you are familiar with. What it refers to, since there's no single, solid, unified definition of open-enabled pedagogy, is just this idea of different tiers or qualities of types of assignments. And open-enabled pedagogy seems to fall into the lower category here. This figure is taken from a Wiley and Hilton article. That it is a material that the student creates, that the material has some value beyond supporting the learner, the creator's learning. It's not just a paper that they mark up or something that they create to demonstrate their proficiency, that material is shared, and that material that is created is openly licensed. So those are the 4 key questions when you're talking about open-enabled pedagogy. Are your students creating new artifacts or revising or remixing existing artifacts? Is that artifact valuable beyond simply the learner and their learning process? And then 3 and 4, notice our special emphasis here. Are students being invited to publicly share their artifact? And are they being invited to offer an open license for that artifact? Open-enabled pedagogy at its core is a learning process where students are significantly involved in the evaluation, curation, and/or production of new learning materials. So we see that there are many wonderful examples of open-enabled pedagogy that are happening all the time. I'm going to refer here just to some published examples of this, but at the conference this year, there are amazing presentations on OEP. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please do, because it's really amazing. You can go from very simple creation of concept examples to actual assessment questions, all the way up to inviting students to participate in the process of creating artifacts and scholarly journals. In fact, in our field, we do have a colleague who's done something sort of like this before. Cynthia Nava was a graduate student and Tara Fahmy was her advisor, and they worked together to invite students to be content creators. They asked the students in this study to develop examples of behavior analysis in everyday life, and those examples then were shared back with a larger class. And the authors presented this as a kind of culturally responsive learning practice. But the only thing that made this not an open-enabled pedagogy process was the fact that they didn't publicly share their materials and they didn't openly license them, but the work is being done. We're just not engaging in that kind of sharing process. And what this means is there's some benefits here to having students be content creators, not only as Nava and colleagues report, not only do you see that kind of individual experience and the voice of the author reflected within their material, you see their culture and their identity reflected in the material that they create. You learn about the user. You get a diverse body of materials that can better reflect not only the user that created it, but the users who follow and access those materials. You then could end up with materials that are far more preferred and culturally responsive than the materials that any of us could have created. So for instance, rather than me coming up with 75 different examples of how Batman, the animated series, demonstrates behavioral principles, we could have students from specific groups that we represent sharing those experiences of their materials and how behavior analysis and their content is reflected in their lives and in their worlds.
So one of the things that we wanted to share with you about our discipline is a little bit of the breakdown in terms of race and ethnicity for providers. And so this graph that you're looking at includes people who have a high school level, master's level, or doctoral level credential through our certification board. And you can see that this particular discipline reflects a little bit more than 50% who identify as white, and then the remaining either not identifying or identifying in minority groups. And this is going to become relevant as we begin to talk about some of the resources that are available and authorship of those resources in terms of how that's reflecting or not reflecting our student body. So Veronica, if you take us to the next slide. So this article came out in one of ABAI's journals, Behavior Analysis and Practice, that what they did was they took a look at institutions that were teaching ABA content to undergraduates. And it was a survey-based project where they basically said, all right, what books are you using? What are you teaching with? What are the articles that you're assigning to students who are taking these undergraduate level behavior analytic courses? And in looking at this a little bit further and digging through what those books were and those articles, you can see that it's overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly white, to a degree that does not represent the field that you just saw in the graph on the earlier slide. So interestingly enough, I actually requested, but my request was denied, to look at the data specifically for the individuals who are holding doctoral level credentials, because what we do know is that those who are producing the articles and the scholarly work tend to be those with the higher degrees, the doctoral degrees, and less so the master's degrees, because I do have a hypothesis that it probably represents even less diversity, but sadly my request for that was not honored, but perhaps they have a reason for doing that. But go ahead, Veronica, take us to the next slide, and let's talk a little bit more about why this matters in our field. So on this particular slide, there are a few things that I wanted to point out to you. So I mentioned earlier in our opening slide, you know, we're behavior nerds. We joke about the fact that we're nerds. We have these cute little memes. And this particular sweatshirt, available to you on Etsy if you want to order it, is up there to sort of honor some of these key names in our discipline. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, do I really want to walk around in a sweatshirt that just has a bunch of old white dudes on it? That's not reflective of our discipline, and it's certainly not at all reflective of the individuals who are primary service providers. We are overwhelmingly female, globally speaking. That's not true when you look at publications and research. The other thing that I'll share with you, and if any of you are in our field of ABA, this will mean something to you, but the pinnacle textbook in our discipline is often referred to as the White Bible. And you have a little screenshot of it in front of you, and I will tell you that mine is currently under my laptop, holding it up so that my camera is at a right height. I think that's a great use for it. But this is really the seminal text in our discipline, and the fact that we have this levity about calling it the White Bible. And I even had a student once who made this comment on here that she sure hopes when she finishes, she can pass the Cooper exam. Cooper's the first author on this book. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It's not the Cooper exam. It's the board exam. You know, this is the book, this is the discipline, and they are not the same thing. But the fact that we've attributed so much about what we do to these old white dudes is pretty significant. So I wanted to share this with you with a little bit of laughter, but it's, in all seriousness, it's really not funny. So Veronica, would you take us through to the next slide here? So we have some projects going on. So we talked about curated, collaborative content that we want to be able to share with you. So here's the what is. That was the why is. Now let's talk a little bit more about what the what is. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about our first project. So one of the things that we know to be true in our discipline is it's extraordinarily vocabulary heavy. We also know that our discipline extends far beyond autism, though a lot of our novices maybe don't see that right away. But what we want is for our students to leave our programs with expertise in fluency in a set of vocabulary to be able to provide examples and non-examples. But sometimes we have students who want, you know, I need more examples, or I want examples that are in animal behavior, or I want an example that has to do with fitness. And so we said, all right, well, here you go. Let's create a glossary together. Let's make this a student project. And so what we're looking for is for our students to be invited to participate in this experience of taking some of these vocabulary terms and sharing examples that are in these different domains. Eventually, when this product is put together, it'll be searchable. So the student who, for example, is really interested in fixed ratio schedules, I know that sounds like tons of fun, can look up a lot of examples about fixed ratio schedules across these different domains. Alternately, if we have a student who's really, really interested in sports and nutrition and fitness, they can say, well, I want to look up sports, nutrition, and fitness, but I want to have essentially a glossary of terms that all fit within that domain. So it'll be searchable through both ways, and hopefully with maybe some preliminary starting steps in the summer or toward the end of next summer. So I wanted to pull a couple of comments to share with you what some of my students have said. And I've only just begun this fall semester. I taught during the first term, so I lifted these for my course evaluations, which are both fun and painful sometimes to look at. But I think they're highly relevant. And so I have this first student, the extra credits I did incentivize optional participation. Glossary project felt super relevant. I wasn't only helping myself, I was helping other students. And then the question, can we keep adding? Can we use the link when this class is over? Can we continue to contribute to this glossary? And of course, the answer there is yes. And then this other comment, which for me did give away who the student was, because she has a particular interest, but I have a student who is not interested at all in disability related applications of ABA. She's interested in athletic coaching applications. Her dream job is to be, you know, a Division II or III college softball coach. And so for her to be able to be excited about a discipline where she can create examples that are specific, as she says, to her dream job is really a neat opportunity.
Well, thank you. I was just finishing an idea in chat because I really love the idea that the students wanted to keep adding and accessing after the project was over. We're going to transition. I want to share with you our next 3 projects. This behavior artifacts project is one that I've been working on. This is the 3rd fall semester in a row, and students have been very kind and very generous. If you come to the website, which you can access using this QR code, you can actually see the students and their projects and the materials that they've created, as well as all the other project materials. But essentially what I wanted to do with this artifacts project is to create an opportunity for students to make content, and not just your traditional college paper, 10 pages, this many words, 4 citations, grading ad nauseum, like that awful feeling of being an instructor where you get a lot of papers and it's just painful to kind of read through, and then you know it and the student knows that it's just going to go in the trash when the semester is over. I didn't want that. I wanted something new and fresh and dynamic. I wanted students to create something that would have value for them in the course to expand their knowledge of the material that they were learning, that would give back to the folks who are following them. So these are students who have gotten to a senior level course in the field. The materials that they're creating are designed to teach the folks who are coming in at the freshman, sophomore level course level. And I just asked students, what is it that you would have wanted to learn about when you were in that course? And they build to that end. So for instance, Brittany has given me permission to share her project. She wanted to present information on how to develop and use a token economy, specifically with the aim of using it with softball coaching, ironically enough, Dr. Potter. But this has 2 purposes. Not only do we have these materials, but also the students who are creating the materials learn more about the content they're creating, and they're learning how to talk about this incredibly complex and Byzantine and language-driven, archaic kind of field in a way that's very user-friendly. And what's important to me also is that the extent to which students want to share or want to openly license is up to them. That's important to me, and I hope that it will be important to you. We'll talk a little bit about why in a moment. Student feedback, one of the best comments that I've gotten about this project was, knowing that other people would be able to access and view the material served as a motivating operation, a term from our field, for me to put forth my best effort and create something that would be informative and educational. Not only did I continue to learn during the process of creating the project, but others can learn from my hard work as well, which feels very different from how I'm used to hearing students talk about their course projects. And when we did a student panel, bringing in students from a variety of different courses that had engaged in this kind of OEP project, student themes that emerged were that they enjoyed the freedom to choose their topic and format, but felt a little bit overwhelmed by it. That the students felt like they developed skills beyond simply learning the content that allowed them to bring their projects to fruition, like video editing or how to animate things using little simple programs online. And that the work of developing that open resource contributed to their learning on a deeper level than they had had in other ways. Now, our colleague Maggie can't join us today, but Maggie also has two really wonderful projects that we want to share with you. And I'm going to touch on them very briefly, just because I want you to have an idea of what these projects are. And I know we're running a little short on time. Maggie's project was to involve graduate students in reviewing the available openly licensed resources that can't be found in metadata. So they looked at the credentialing list, the task list shown on the left, and they looked at available resources in our field, typically those of Sitecore or lectures that I've created and put out on the internet. And they essentially aligned the materials that you could find with the task list as a way of curating an ancillary set of resources. And this was a really wonderful and very timely project because this was done during the COVID-19 lockdown when students were losing a lot of their placements and couldn't do hands-on work anymore. This provided them an opportunity to interact with the material, to develop the kind of work that they would be doing as clinical behavior analysts, researching, finding resources, things like that. And the students who worked on this project were really excited to be able to actually sit down with the content creators that they had been listening to forever at the end of the project and just talk about the experience of doing the curation project. And the students reported that that was really gratifying for them. Finally, Maggie has been working on a book and is working really hard on the book, but the book is not ready yet. So forgive my tongue-in-cheek joke here, but the book is not quite ready, but we hope it will be soon. And neither the book nor Maggie could be here today. But Maggie has taken this graduate level paper writing project and turned it into something really amazing where all of these pieces that students are developing related to the field are being analyzed using the rubric on the right, and then they're working together to develop materials to make the first openly licensed book in behavior analysis. And we're really proud of the work that Maggie is doing, but we want to springboard off of that into talking about some of the considerations for this. And if I'm going to take a couple, and then Dr. Potter, if you're comfortable, if you want to talk about recruiting student participants. This is really hard work to do alone. And I'm very fortunate that I'm surrounded by wonderful people like Dr. Potter and Dr. Sane and all of the members of our SIG. But we had to find one another. We had to aggressively seek out other people in our field and kind of wrangle them all together and really be pioneers in open resources in our field. Even though we're still a little bit outsidey, still a little bit pioneery, we hope that you know that there's still a possibility to do that as well. And this can be a lot of work. So we wanted to incorporate OER and OEP into work that we were already doing because the resources very often aren't there in terms of time and buyout money. These projects then turn into a kind of labor of love. And as a person who is both faculty and advocating for faculty to adopt open resources, I hope that those of us who are advocating for others to make that change remember how much time and effort and work goes into this. And especially now during the pandemic when everyone is really tight and tired all the time, that sometimes projects don't go smoothly.
Great. So in terms of recruiting students, you've heard us talk before about trying to invite them to come in, this notion of it not necessarily being mandatory, while the work might be mandatory for a class, in terms of it becoming part of an openly licensed outcome is not necessarily. And then making sure that we are choosing to offer some type of incentivization. So I did offer extra credit. I felt it was meaningful extra credit and chose to do that as part of this process. But what's kind of neat is in asking students their permission to use this work, we're also engaging with them and teaching them about OER, what OER are, and how they can continue to be contributors in that way. Spot on timing.
Boom. So, and we do hope that if you have any questions, of course, please throw them out here in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and talk. I know that the recording will be stopped in a moment, but if you'd like to reach out for any of these additional materials or anything else that we can get for you, please don't hesitate to contact us.
I would go ahead and type your email addresses in the chat bar as well, just for people who can't grab screenshots. There's a lot of thank yous coming in. Thank you so much for that presentation, everyone. They don't seem like they'll be mad if you contact them, so please reach out to Veronica or Rachel. Thank you all so much. That presentation was great. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for being here.